Welcome into the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show. I'm your host, Jeff Bell. I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Jagger May, and we have a special guest today. We are going to do Dynasty running back tiers, and we have Football Guys' own Dave Kluge, a good friend of ours, and Dave just dropped a massive Bible of an article talking about his different running back buckets, tiers that he sorts the running backs into. So we thought it would be a perfect time to bring Dave on and talk about running backs. First, I want to kick it to Jagger, say good morning, Jagger. We are recording early in the morning. How are you doing today? And are you ready to talk some running backs?
I'm tired, but there is no better time to talk about running backs than right now at 6 a.m. where I'm at. So,
well, yes, and like I mentioned, we have a fantastic guest today. We have Dave Kluge today. Dave, how are you? Are you ready to talk about running backs? I really want to dive into running back theory maybe more on this show. We're definitely going to do running back ranks and tiers.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys will both get a kick out of this. As you know, we got Bob Harris on staff, and Bob Harris is always preaching, you love your words, but you got to get rid of them. Make the article shorter. Make the article shorter. This article is almost 5,000 words long, and I knew Bob was going to have an issue with it, but got probably the best message you can get from Bob Harris this morning when he said, just finished reading your running back article. A lot of words, but I enjoyed them all.
A lot of words.
That's so important. Economy of words. That's what we're driving towards. But yeah, you don't waste many, and you did a fantastic job there. Before we move on, please take a moment to like and subscribe this video. We obviously have launched the brand new Dynasty feed on the YouTube channel here on Football Guys. We're going to have this Dynasty show there. We're going to have Jagger Shorts there. We're going to have all kinds of different content coming to you. So make sure to like and subscribe.
Also, be sure to head over to footballguys.com/plans to get a premium subscription. Elite subscribers get custom Dynasty, IDP, salary cap, basically anything for you degenerates for less than $70 annually. So head over to footballguys.com to join today.
And we're not going to mess around here. We're going to dive into our tier one of running backs. And I think we all have the same 4 players grouped into our tier one. And that's kind of consensus across the dynasty industry. We run it down. We have Bijan Robinson at running back 1. We have Breece Hall running back 2. Jahmyr Gibbs running back 3. You're kind of leaning into the youth and the upside with those players. And then Christian McCaffrey at running back 4. Dave, do you have any splits off that? Or do you have anything that you want to comment about that tier?
Well, I think it makes sense to have them all grouped in a similar tier as far as value, because the reality is Christian McCaffrey's probably going to be the RB1 again this year. Since joining San Francisco, he has basically been a 20-point and a weekly touchdown machine. It's hard to take that away from him, but his age really does separate him from the pack for me. So I've kind of got a mini tier break where Christian McCaffrey is kind of alone in his own tier. I know it's like blasphemous to say, but I think that if you're rostering Christian McCaffrey, you should probably be looking to sell right now. And I talked about that in my article. It's tough to stomach, and he could be the RB1 this year. He could be the RB1 again next year. But these running backs, when they get up into that age, become so volatile. I mean, look at Austin Eckler, for example. Austin Eckler had been an RB1 machine, a top 3 running back almost every single season. 1 year with injuries, and then all of a sudden he's released from Los Angeles, hits free agency. Now all of a sudden the perception we have of him is totally different. Rather than being a pass-catching, touchdown-scoring RB1 machine, now he's a 29-year-old off an injury on a new team, and he plummeted. He went from being a top 10 dynasty running back. Now he's outside of the top 24 in a lot of rankings. I don't think that's going to happen to Christian McCaffrey, but God forbid, let's say he comes out week 1, hurts himself, has a down year. The 49ers can save a few $1 million by releasing him after this season. He could find himself on the same exact trajectory as Austin Eckler. So he could be the RB1 this year. He could also see his value plummet. I just see him as a very volatile asset, and I'd be trying to flip him for a quarterback or a wide receiver if I could.
Yeah, or even tearing down, just tear down or for get Jonathan Taylor plus if you can.
Absolutely.
I know you and Alfredo Brown, our good friend Alfredo Brown, had JJ Zachariason on your show this week. And one of the things that JJ has done work on that really stuck with me, he looked into dynasty value at one point, and he talked about when players lose that initial dip in dynasty value, they never really recover up to that level again. And you're exactly right there on Christian McCaffrey. You're just we have weathered injuries in the past, but obviously we've seen the upside in that 49ers offense. But you're right. We're just waiting for one thing at his age, and then that value is going to plummet out of it. I am curious for both of you, when you're in startups, when you're building rosters, is this a tier that you like to operate in at all? Or is this a fade for you to allow quarterbacks, wide receivers to hopefully fall down to you? How do you kind of attack this tier?
I do fade it. And I know that sounds crazy because these are guys who check every single box. They're young, they're athletic, they're in good situations. They've proven that they can score points in fantasy at the NFL level. But for me, it just comes down to the volatility. Like we see guys regularly just plummet at the running back position that we don't see at any other position. Look at Javonte Williams as a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
After his rookie season, he was the RB2. He was getting drafted as a late first round pick, and he checked all of those boxes. He was young. He was athletic. He scored points. He caught passes. He did all of those things. All it took was one injury for him to fall to RB22. You're not going to see that happen. Garrett Wilson, if he goes out and hurts himself, he's going to have insulated value. Anthony Richardson started 3 games last year and is still insulated as a first-round pick, holding on to that value. Justin Fields had 2 terrible seasons as a passer and was still holding on to insulated value as a first-round pick. So for me, when I'm investing premium draft capital in startups, I am almost exclusively looking at quarterbacks and wide receivers in those first few rounds.
I agree, and like Jahmyr Gibbs right now, just from the few startups I've been, that's when I'm thinking about clicking the button, and he doesn't make it back to me, so I move on. Right now, like I'm not trying to debo the show or anything or get ahead of it, but like the next tier is where I like to draft, and that is early for me. I just feel like now. Like, I don't know, we did it, guys. We finally suppressed running back value, and it's reasonable. I'm willing to draft Jonathan Taylor now. I'd be like, nope, I fade all the top 12. That used to be me. So,
and the thing, like, you could start your draft with like 2 quality quarterbacks
yeah.
and then get Jonathan Taylor in the 3rd round. Like, it's been pushed down that far. It's just really tough for me when I'm going to start up and I'm looking at the options. If you want Bijan Robinson, you have to choose. Do you want Bijan Robinson or do you want Anthony Richardson, Kyler Murray, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison? And it's really hard for me to click Bijan Robinson ahead of any of those guys.
Yeah.
I do want to make a quick segue, quick point on Bijan Robinson. I think this is a great opportunity with the arrival of Kirk Cousins into that Atlanta offense. Do you guys think that we're going to see that step up from the hype of what we expected Bijan Robinson to come in and be that fantasy monster and potential running back 1, and especially in redraft, but certainly we've got him in Dynasty at all? Or is this a situation you still think there's going to be maybe Tyler Algier mixed in, maybe just the natural transition away from running backs? Like, where are you kind of landing on Bijan Robinson at the moment?
I think the addition of Kirk Cousins isn't as important as the subtraction of Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
I think regardless of who the quarterback was, just getting Arthur Smith out of the picture is really going to help things take off for Bijan Robinson. And he does, he's got the pedigree and all that. He'll insulate his value somewhat. But look at last year. I mean, Breece Hall coming off of the ACL tear, just like a lot of these other guys we've talked about, checked all the boxes his rookie season, got injured, and saw his value plummet. And he was able to regain some of that value. But last year, you were able to get Breece Hall at a severe discount. And if something happens to Bijan or Jahmyr Gibbs this season and they get injured, there will be a huge buy window open for them next offseason. It's just hard to stomach right now, coming off of good years and being healthy. It's really tough to stomach that price tag.
Yeah, and I think it's like we're just gonna see reasonable splits. Like it's still gonna be. We're gonna see Jace McClellan or Tyler Algier gonna come in because like you don't want to give your running back 100% of the carries, but like I think it's gonna be more of a 60-40 split, which we couldn't count on last year. Like I think there was several games where Algier was dominating touches, getting 60% of them. That'll be gone. So don't freak out if you see Algier get a carry every now and then. We just can't run the tires off Bijan just yet.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stats from last year is that Royce Freeman had a higher share of his team's goal line touches than Bijan Robinson did.
Oh man, that's just criminal.
No, and I think Jagger made a perfect segue into our next tier. We're going to step in and we're going to talk about Jonathan Taylor, running back 5, Travis Etienne, running back 6, and then Saquon Barkley at running back 7. We do have Saquon Barkley a little bit ahead of where a site like Keep Trade Cut is holding him at running back 9. Maybe just real quick, do you guys just view the upside in that Philadelphia offense and that structure to be able to support him a little bit more there relative to maybe some of the injury history, some of the age concerns?
Discount Christian McCaffrey, in my opinion. He's in an elite offense, and he's going to dominate a lot of the carries. Like I expect Will Shipley to get a little bit of burn. Like I actually like Will Shipley in like best ball and stuff like that. But Saquon to me, like when you think about guaranteed at least value or at least production if he stays healthy, I don't think any of the running backs afterwards really have that. Maybe Jonathan Brooks, but Jonathan Brooks is a rookie, and he's coming off an injury. So until we see it, it's just hard to put anyone else into this tier.
I just want to point out that, going through this, looking at my rankings, Jagger's rankings, Jeff rankings, we are almost absolutely in lockstep. I think we've got like a few players flip-flopped here and there, but our top 9 is identical at this point. And Jeff, you and I talked about it. I can't remember when, but recently we were on a show and we were talking about Saquon Barkley. There was this huge there's this weird like fear surrounding the Philadelphia Eagles offense. And Jeff, you wrote a great article years ago about the rise of Konami code quarterbacks and how that can negatively impact running backs. But we haven't really seen that in Philadelphia. Yeah, Jalen Hurts rushes the ball a lot. We think that he doesn't check down all that much. We think that he's going to steal all the goal line touches, but we just saw Miles Sanders have a good year 2 years ago. We saw DeAndre Swift have a good year 2 years ago, and Saquon Barkley is a better talent than both of them. So if Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift were both able to produce in this offense, it would be foolish not to have faith in Saquon Barkley doing the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do think there are two of environmental factors that are potentially pushing the value of Saquon Barkley upwards. The loss of Travis Kelce and whether we're going to see the same effectiveness out of that tush push and whether or not they really want to use that, because we saw Jalen Hurts' injury last year. He was probably hiding something. Maybe it was kind of the talk around him towards his fall off towards the end of last year, which would kind of suggest that potentially using the running back more in the passing game. And so I think that those two factors allow Barkley to grab more goal line work potentially than we've seen historically off Eagles running backs, him just being better than Eagles running backs that we've seen in the past, but also some of that self-preservation on Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. And a little bit to piggyback off what Dave said, Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift have never been goal line backs. Like that's like, I mean, come on now, like I love both. I only love Swift. I've never been a Sanders guy, but like I love Sanders. But there's a reason why he's mainly catching dump offs and getting some third down work, because in the goal line, Jalen Hurts is arguably a better goal line back than DeAndre Swift ever was. And now that you actually have someone, Quadzilla or whatever, or Saquon Barkley, then you're ready to go. It's just a lot of people, especially in fantasy, we make the mistake of thinking that everything is a plug and play when we're not all reality. We're trying to force square pegs into circle holes. It's just that it's not always how it works. Saquon Barkley is just a significantly better talent than DeAndre Swift is, who is also a good talent. Like, to me, that's just more telling of who Saquon Barkley is, who we've been seeing rot behind Daniel Jones for 4 years,
And when we saw him with not even a great quarterback, but just a slightly above average quarterback in aging Eli Manning, he was the RB1 in fantasy. And granted, that was years ago. He was younger before the injuries and all that. But quick little tangent, we talk about the tush push all the time and how that could negatively impact the running backs. But Jason Kelce did retire, and maybe we don't see that as much this year. And maybe, just maybe, there's a world we hear all the time, Jalen Hurts can squat 600 pounds. Well, Saquon Barkley could squat even more than that. So what if they just teach Saquon Barkley, hey, you learn how to take a snap and we'll use you as the tush push, maybe preserve their $250 million asset that they have in Jalen Hurts a little bit. Maybe I'm getting too far outside of the box, but I think it's kind of foolish to keep running the quarterback in that play.
I think one of the biggest factors for Barkley will be the return of big plays. And if you watch historically, the way that he's kind of operated, he's one of those guys that he might lose a yard here, gain 2 yards here, but then he rips off a 60-yard run. And I think that the way the Giants were constructed last year, maybe the year before, not only those injuries coming off of those injuries, but having the lack of other options, downfield threats, spreading the field and allowing him to attack. And so when you add Jalen Hurts in there, potential RPO action, bringing defenses one direction going the other way, having AJ Brown as a downfield blocker potentially, the addition of Johnny Wilson if he's playing, or bringing Devontae Parker in kind of as that big wide receiver flex hybrid slot type player to allow for a little bit better downfield blocking, should hopefully return some of those big plays as well as the return to health. But I think
how many times did we see DeAndre Swift just like untouched 18 yards downfield, just through a lane, 12 feet wide?
And that's an 18-yard run for DeAndre Swift, and that's a 58-yard touchdown for Saquon Barkley. So I think that's kind of what one of the most exciting things. Tier 3 is a little bit of I think this is maybe a transition tier. Players that can potentially move up, or players that really kind of could reach that point where they're moving down. And right now we've got Devon Achane from the Miami Dolphins sitting there, Ken Walker from the Seattle Seahawks, and then Jonathan Brooks, the rookie for the Carolina Panthers. And I think it's interesting. Jonathan Brooks is stepping into potential to have a lot of volume for an offense that really, really needs that. But it doesn't seem like we're getting the classic excitement around a rookie running back like we typically have seen. I don't know if that's washed back off of so much hype from Bijan Robinson or just kind of the fate of the Carolina Panthers offense. But we got to start with Devon Achane because Jagger has him at running back 7. I have him at running back 6. Dave's got him outside of his top 10. And so this is going to be an opportunity here for Dave to kind of talk about why you've got Devon Achane down the board relative to maybe market value or where we're sitting.
I mean, it just comes down to him not profiling as a workhorse. And what we saw last year was great, but I think it's going to be really tough to recapture that magic. The big red flag for me is obviously injury as well. We saw him struggle with injuries in college. We saw him get injured in the preseason. We saw him get nicked up multiple times in the season last year, his rookie year. And they said that he's bulked up a little bit. And while that might lend to fewer injuries, that could take away the speed that makes him so valuable. I've just fallen for this trap a lot in Dynasty where we see these small, hyper-efficient guys. And I think that Devon Achane can be good. I think that he has the skill set to be valuable to the Miami Dolphins. I just think that if we're looking at longevity and we're looking at the ability to preserve workloads and we're trying to project out years ahead, it's really tough to put him there. And even if you look at fantasy rankings this year, he's getting ranked as a back-end RB1, high-end RB2. So I'm kind of confused if, we know running backs perform at their best when they're young. It seems like Dynasty rankings right now are putting Devon Achane ahead of redraft and best ball rankings. And I'm just a little bit confused by that because we're expecting more longevity than we are production this year. And really that should be flip-flopped. Like I said, I like Devon Achane. He's exciting. I was all about him last year. I was saying that his skill set pairs up perfectly with what they're trying to do in Miami, and it worked out well for him. I just think that right now with where he's getting valued, I think a lot of that is just kind of comes from the lack of excitement outside of the first tier. We're trying to put flashy, gaudy names up there, but there's a lot of guys that profile to be workhorses that we can really project volume on 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And I don't know if you can say the same about Etienne.
Yeah, and I think that I'm not ready to argue with you yet, Dave. This is where, and I'm curious to see where like someone like you, Dave, and you, Jeff, really think. My ranking of Achane has to do with a little bit of perceived value, and to give you guys a real life theory and game scenario, that roster that you guys just gave me in one of our football guys staff leagues has Devon Achane. It is pretty talent depleted. That's someone I'm trying to move the first pop game. Like, as soon as it happens, I'm trying to secure the bag of it because, like, Devon Achane, with this tier here of Kenneth Walker and Achane, with the exception of Jonathan Brooks, here's the tier where I'm trying to move up or down, if that makes sense. Like, I don't really want to roster Achane. I don't want to roster Ken Walker because I don't know what that backfield is going to look like. So it's like, basically what I'm saying is, like, I agree with you. I've ranked him high because other people rank him high. And that's not me saying that, like, you got to have a consensus or whatever. But at the end of the day, we are kind of working within a market. So it's hard for me to suppress his value when I know I can get top 10 upside from plenty of people.
And I think that for me, what I try to find is where there is a big gap between my personal rankings and consensus rankings. If I'm, playing, I don't want to, but if I'm playing a contest where I'm trying to be as accurate as possible, I'm going to skew a little bit more towards the consensus. But if I'm trying to just base, rank off of how I feel, I've got Achane a little bit lower. That being said, when I do see a huge gap like this, where I'm ranking Achane outside of my top 12, I see that his consensus ranking has him as RB6, RB7, RB8. If I've got him on any rosters, I'm trying to flip him. The problem is his consensus value right now, people are saying he's an RB1, but I floated offers out there just trying to get a mid-first round pick for Achane, and people aren't even biting on it. So I think there's a huge misconception between what his consensus value is and where people are actually willing to buy him.
So you're saying I should just push him down so his value is
there you go.
And I always think there's a disconnect between the trade market and the startup market. And I think that when you're in a startup market, I think people are maybe a little bit more willing to grab Achane given that the youth around him. But I think in a trade, people are so hesitant. It's so hard to trade a running back, and you really have to look for the right situations to trade running backs. part of I hear your talk on Jagger on market value on him, but part of my view on Achane is there's so much uncertainty around almost every single backfield in the NFL, and we see running backs fall off all the time. I don't know how many people were grabbing Miles Sanders and last year thinking that he's going to explode in the Carolina offense. Complete fall off the map. I don't think we even ranked Miles Sanders. So yeah, you're seeing players move up and down. But as you're seeing, my argument has always been you're seeing a transition in the NFL run game away from these volume eaters and away from having that, because teams want to be able to set themselves up. They understand that injuries are going to happen. They don't want their offense to completely fall apart, and they're just not building around running backs. And so when I'm looking in that type of scenario, that type of market, I'm looking for players that are able to splash, to be able to have those big 13-point, 15-point plays here and there. And we saw Achane last year have that massive game against the Denver Broncos, dropping 50 fantasy points. And so last week we talked about the quarterback boom bust market a little bit there and kind of targeting those Konami quarterbacks with the high upside. I want a running back that can give me those big splashes relative to just somebody that's going to grind out, maybe my 13 PPR points and kind of move on. And so I think that's the way I view Achane sitting in that Miami Dolphins offense. I think the ceiling is as high as any player any week. And so that's kind of maybe my view on him. And I do wonder if he's not going to heat up a little bit relative in the redraft market. Maybe that might be your time to move him there, Jag.
Yeah.
So my argument,
exactly
go ahead, Jagger.
No, I was agreeing with Jeff. It's like that's like I'm gonna hold him right now because I'm not gonna get the value. But unless something happens in training camp, he's inevitably gonna have a spike week. And then when we're in the throes of the season, and then people think they can win, that's when they're willing to pay up.
Yep.
Like there's especially with running backs, there's a time and place to buy and sell. Right now, it's the time to buy. In season is the time to sell.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said in theory, Jeff, as like wanting the guys that have the huge spike weeks, kind of playing it on a week-to-week basis rather than a season-long, years-out basis. But everything you said about Achane, the hyper efficiency and the ability to score points and rip off big plays and stuff like that, I feel like you can get those types of players later for so much cheaper, and you don't have to put the same investment you did in Achane. So Keaton Mitchell might not have had a 50-point game yet, but if you look at his efficiency, it was very similar to what we saw from Achane. Jaleel McLaughlin is another guy who had that hyper efficiency, and we may not have seen the big games, but I'd be willing to buy those guys for a fraction of the cost before they have that 3-4 touchdown 50-point outing like we already saw from Achane, and try to get ahead of the market a little bit.
You could probably trade for Keaton Mitchell for Fab right now. I know he's down bad.
Oh yeah,
I'm just saying, if you're grabbing Keaton Mitchell, make sure to grab Rasheen Ali, because I think that Keaton Mitchell was undrafted free agent, had a massive knee injury that he needs to recover off of. Ali profiles is very much the same back, and to me, that is a situation where the Ravens recognize the value that can hold in their offense, and then they said, I don't know if this guy's ever going to be the same again. We need to get another one of these guys right away. And maybe Mitchell returns to health, but even if he does, I think that having Derrick Henry as that main back there and then rotating those two players through, Mitchell and Ali through, to have that home run threat to keep those guys fresh might be the scenario that you see play out there.
Yeah, to Dave's point, there's Zoomy boys you can get later for cheaper. Don't buy the premium Zoomy boy.
Well, I think that's time to move into tier 4 then. And tier 4 is a little bit of an interesting tier because there's some youth here, there's some uncertainty, but there's also some potential high value here. We've got Isaiah Pacheco, Josh Jacobs, Rachaad White, Kyren Williams, James Cook, Trey Benson, all in this tier. And so again, leading into that youth, Jagger's got Isaiah Pacheco at running back 19. I'm much higher on Isaiah Pacheco. Jagger, why are you fading Pacheco in potentially the best offense in the NFL?
Because to me, it just seems like they're trying to replace him every year. They're always picking up guys. Like people forget that Pacheco's a 7th round pick, and he's fun to watch, and people love him because he's that tough, bring your lunch pail to work type guy and a good locker room player. But at the end of the day, this is a league that values talent. And I just feel like one day we're going to find that brick wall of Pacheco. Until he signs another contract, I just don't buy it. And then when you think of other running backs in similar situations, let's say day 3 or later, Kyren Williams, who we'll talk about, I think is a better talent than Isaiah Pacheco. And I don't think Kyren Williams is just that that great of a talent. He's a little bit better on third down, much better pass catcher. So again, like Pacheco's someone that I would rather buy if I'm really winning and need a discount running back, but he's not like to me when you get into like top 15, those are building blocks. Like out of all the guys that we've talked about, these are guys that I could see a future beyond this season, with maybe the exception of Kyren because we're not sure, and James Cook. But everyone else are guys that I know that I'm going to at least have rostered for another season. I can't see that with Pacheco.
I think that's a fair argument. And Pacheco, when I did my article that I just wrote on Dynasty running backs, it wasn't really a flat list of rankings. I kind of bucketed guys into similar profiles. And I think it's a fun kind of thought exercise. You know, if you look, like Antonio Gibson is like the 40th player I talk about. He's not my RB40, but he falls into a group with a lot of other players that I think that maybe you should be trying to sell. Isaiah Pacheco, and we're like already in the weeds of dynasty running back rankings. Like it falls off the cliff hard. So like you could have Isaiah Pacheco as high as RB6 or as low as RB20, and it's really hard to push back in either way because it's really just this cluster once you get outside of the top kind of two tiers here. So for me, Isaiah Pacheco fell into a bucket with Rachaad White and Kyren Williams. And they all are very similar players where they're still kind of young, which is alluring, but there's been nothing really efficient about them. And they aren't really great football players. And I know that we just saw them all come off of seasons where they finished as top 10 running backs. But I think that their volume is so volatile and hard to project going forward. What made them so valuable last year was that they were leading the league in weighted opportunities, and they were scoring touchdowns, and they were catching passes, and they were scoring fantasy points. But that can disappear like this with the addition of a free agent or with a draft pick. They don't have anything that's insulating their value long term. These guys weren't drafted highly. They aren't really that efficient. They just kind of got a lot of touches last year. And it's really tough to say that that happens in 2024 or 2025 or 2026. So these are guys that I all have pegged as sells. Rachaad White, Isaiah Pacheco, Kyren Williams, all kind of fall into the same bucket for me as guys that were kind of saviors last year if you had them on your dynasty squads, but it's really tough to expect that again this season or next year.
Rachaad White, man, his value seems like evergreen because like I was trying to move him all offseason, trying to get a second, something for him that I can re-roll, and no one would buy him. And now I'm holding him and I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to keep him because like Bucky Irvin could have a role, but Rachaad White is going to get 15 touches again, barring injury. It's pretty crazy. Now I'm curious, one guy I guess that like we can only talk about so much. We're at 27 minutes. Is Josh Jacobs and Trey Benson seem like they don't belong in this tier, but they are. It's just like you said, it's such a quagmire. Like where are we at with Josh Jacobs? I know some people are like he's one of those players where you either super high or you're not.
Yeah, and I'm high on him in redraft, but I think it's fair to ask the question because I do believe in the talent of Marshawn Lloyd. We've seen that history of usage in that Green Bay offense. They like to use two backs, and so that's going to be the big question. They kept A.J. Dillon around. I don't know if A.J. Dillon's any more now at this point than maybe an innings eater or a guy just break the glass in case of emergency, but Lloyd does have a big upside. And so having that investment at that position, I think it speaks to how valuable the Packers view running back in their offense in general. I know Aaron Jones was a team leader and that was a big part they lost out and obviously made a major investment to get Josh Jacobs, but then backing him up with a day 2 pick. And so that would make me think that they want to make sure these guys stay healthy maybe and maintain some of that status quo when it comes to splitting the backfields. But is Lloyd going to be ready? Is Lloyd any good? That's going to be the question. And this could really be a Josh Jacobs is a bell cow, should be a top 5 potential back.
I think my fear with Josh Jacobs is that last year he got hurt and they were able to just sub in Jahmyr White and the offense didn't miss a beat. Jahmyr White was just as productive as Josh Jacobs. That's concerning when, a day 3 running back is able to replicate the same value you're hoping to get from Josh Jacobs.
I think there was some self-preservation mode going on in that Raiders offense last year for Josh Jacobs.
That's exactly what I was about to say. He was just like, well, I'm out. He's like, you want to play, Josh? He's like, I'm good. Y'all have fun, though. It's just.
And Jahmyr White comes in running hard and hungry, and we see that sometimes. But
yeah, and then for bringing up Lloyd, who's significantly lower in tiers here. He's a guy that we talked about. You want someone who is a discount and can score on limited touches. Lloyd is that guy. And like you said, the Packers have never had like a 70% share at a running back. Like it's barely been 60%. They're pretty close to 50-50.
Got to go back to Eddie Lacy.
Yeah, it's just like that's never been a part of their identity, So it's again, we're kind of getting to where I like to shop for running backs here pretty soon,
Well, and one of those guys that you kind of have to talk about when you're talking about this stuff is Kyren Williams. We saw the upside in that, but this time last year you could buy Kyren Williams for free. And so when you're talking about kind of these deeper running backs to target, that look for that profile, look for that player that was drafted. And I think that when you dug into the weeds a little bit, one of the things I saw when I did projections last year was that Williams got a lot of passing down usage that didn't translate to fantasy points at the end of last year. And so everybody was circling Cam Akers as, well, look how many fantasy points he scored. But when you dug into the actual usage and the snaps, Williams was a lot more involved than I think we realized. So kind of looking for those profiles of those backup running backs that could gain value, or those players that maybe the community is off because they were a hot rookie last year, but then they didn't do anything. I think that those are players that I think are worth targeting for really cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to talk about James Cook? Dave's got him ranked as running back 10 right now, and I think
I've got to ask.
Okay,
yeah,
I know I was driving the Cook bus last year. I had him ranked as a top 12 running back. He did finish as a top 12 running back. We see the addition of Ray Davis into that offense, and whether or not what that Buffalo offense is going to look like, because they really wanted that secondary threat last year. Damian Harris was hurt and really inefficient. Latavius Murray played a lot, was inefficient. They brought in Leonard Fournette, and he couldn't even make the team. So it kind of was default last year on James Cook. And Dave, do you think that he showed enough last year that he's going to maintain that value? Or do you think the addition of Ray Davis tips their hand on wanting that dual threat backfield?
Yeah, and I think they kind of tipped their hand last year when they brought in Damian Harris, and it didn't work out. But that's what they've wanted to do for some time, and they tried it again with Leonard Fournette. But for me, you talked about how J.J. Zacharyson said that, like, once a running back dips in value, it's really hard to retain that. We were so excited about James Cook going into his rookie season. Second-round pick, had the speed, had all the exciting things we wanted, basically face-planted as a rookie. And then even early in the season last year, he was getting some opportunity, but he wasn't especially efficient with it. For me, it was the change in usage once Ken Dorsey left and Joe Brady took over as the offensive coordinator. Then we saw him getting used way more in the passing game. We saw him getting used more creatively around the goal line as well. And while it's tough to say that that's a guarantee this year, I think that we saw it enough last year under Joe Brady that I feel comfortable in him this year. Again, like I said, like RB7, 8, all the way through RB20, you can kind of just like put him in a Yahtzee cup and shake him up. Like, it's really splitting hairs between all of these guys. But James Cook, in my opinion, a second round pick on a good offense with game breaking speed and usage in the passing game, that checks a lot of boxes for me. So I'm willing to put him ahead of a lot of the other guys that we've talked about.
Since you basically don't care that much about the ranking, I won't push back that hard, because like you said, it's like a quagmire, for 15 ranks.
And that's always been my struggle with linear rankings. Like, you have somebody running back 10 and he might not be any more valuable in your eyes than running back 16, but you see 10 and you see 16 and people say, oh my God. And maybe they're just really the same player in the same tier. That moves us into tier 5 now. And this might be the controversy tier a little bit. Running back 17, we got Derrick Henry. Then we go with DeAndre Swift, Rhamondre Stevenson, Blake Corum, Tyjae Spears, David Montgomery, Javonte Williams, Joe Mixon, and Alvin Kamara. So we're probably going to start off here. We have a resident Bears fan, and we would be remiss if we didn't take advantage of talking about that new backfield with the Chicago Bears. And you guys are on me a little bit on my ranking of DeAndre Swift. I'm got a bit behind you guys, and so this is my opportunity to defend myself on why I'm ranking DeAndre Swift where I'm ranking him. And I think that one, looking historically at that Shane Waldron offense is part of it. The way that we saw target share break down out of the running backs last year, the Seattle Seahawks were 24th in running back target share at just under 16%, 15.8%. They were really closer to the bottom 3 of running back target share than they were to even in the top 20. And so that's one area I have questions about how much passing game usage Swift is going to see. I think you're going to see a 3-headed backfield is my expectation, because Khalil Herbert has shown enough to show that he should be getting carries. And I don't think they're going to throw Roschon Johnson quite out right now. And then my other question would be goal line usage. Are we going to see DeAndre Swift around the goal line? Or are we going to see some of these bigger backs around the goal line, especially Johnson? And so if we're peeling it back in potentially a three-headed backfield with less passing volume maybe across the league than what we're seeing historically, and then we're also having goal line questions, I mean, why are we going to rank Swift high? We talked about that high value with the Eagles offense with Saquon Barkley, but then Swift turned that into wasn't even a running back, top 20 running back last year in that situation, and that was a perfect situation for Swift with no real threats relative there. And so at some point, people are going to wake up and realize DeAndre Swift is at least 25 now, it'll be age 25 season, a 26, 27-year-old running back, and all this hype that we've held for the last 5 years on Swift has never really materialized.
I would just like to defend myself a little bit and say that I'm Switzerland in this situation, all right? Like, I'm not super high on DeAndre Swift. I'm right in between where you and Jagger have him ranked. So whatever opinion Jagger is going to have here, I'm just going to agree with both of you guys. I think that he's a talented player, but I agree with everything that you said as well. I think people got really excited about DeAndre Swift in Chicago just because it was the first signing that was announced when free agency opened up, and everyone was like, woo, DeAndre Swift in Chicago, and people got way over their skis about it, and then all the other news started coming out, and it kind of got lost in the fold. I'm not especially excited about it. I think we just know who he is at this point. It's tough to ignore that he has fallen into the bad graces of every coaching staff he's ever been with, whether it was Detroit or in Philadelphia. He has kind of played himself out of the role that we wanted him to see. Maybe he can turn it around, but typically we don't see that when a player is on their second contract.
Yeah, for me, I like running backs and good offenses. It's real easy for me. And I think that the Bears should have a significantly better offense. And I don't believe that it's going to be a three-headed monster. I believe it's going to be DeAndre Swift and sometimes someone else to take the short yardage role. And, Caleb Williams is no Jalen Hurts. We don't need to worry about that. It's just like Roschon didn't do enough for me last year. I don't know. Like Roschon was touted to be an excellent pass blocker and to be an efficient runner. And I didn't see either of those things. Like specifically one game, I saw Roschon Johnson have the worst pass blocking game I probably watched that season, especially out of Chicago. So when you're not good at the one thing that you're supposed to be good at, and you're you kind of transition running back, it's hard for me to really buy into you. Now, I'm not saying I hate the player. I just don't think he's ever going to be what we thought he was going to be as a 4th round pick. So that's where I'm at with him. And I guess I'm not going to fight too hard for the sake of time. It's just it's hard for me to put DeAndre Swift in the same bucket as Javonte Williams or Joe Mixon or Alvin Kamara right now. I think that's what it is. Arguably you could split these this tier, but because we have consensus, it's kind of where they're at,
Well, I think fantasy points wise, it's pretty easy to put them in the same bucket as many of those other guys, but that's
come on. Come on.
All right. Real quick, we're kind of pressed against time here. Real quick, do we want to talk about Rhamondre Stevenson? Jagger, I know you're the Patriots fan. Do you want to kind of talk about maybe what you're seeing profiling in that Alex Van Pelt offense for Stevenson?
Yeah, we can skip my Montgomery delusion, but to quote it, let's read the sheet. Dave said that we were smoking crack about Rhamondre Stevenson. I'm all in on Alex Van Pelt. And that doesn't mean I'm saying Drake May is going to finish like C.J. Stroud or something like that. It's mainly about the running game. We've seen Cleveland's running game and how they deployed running backs, and even with a second running back, I think I think they both have value. And I don't see. I mean, to me, it's hard to not argue that Rhamondre can't repeat his 2023 success, if not, or his 2022 success, if not his 2024 success. So it's a lot of outside zone where I think Rhamondre does better. And last year they were running a lot of complicated gap schemes, and really they try to change their identity, and they try to change the one thing that was good about their identity, which was the running game, which is a huge mistake. So with that being said, it's kind of like if anything, I draft coaches more than anything, and I'm drafting this running scheme, and I've seen enough about Rhamondre, and I love him at cost. So,
Dave, why are we crazy before we move into our final tier?
Rhamondre Stevenson, I'm just not all that sold on the talent. I mean, this guy really struggled to beat out Damian Harris as a rookie, and then
What?
he had this year too. Yeah, if you look through the games when Damian Harris was healthy, they were splitting touches, and Damian Harris was the lead back in almost every single game where both of them were healthy. Rhamondre Stevenson came. I'll share the numbers with you after the show. I've got them ready. I've talked about this at length. It was year two. Rhamondre Stevenson was shoehorned into a workhorse role when Damian Harris got injured, but he wasn't all that efficient in that role. He stumbled for 1,000 yards and he got a ton of targets, and that was great for fantasy. But I don't think that they want Rhamondre Stevenson to be the workhorse because he hasn't been good in that role. And I think that they
And
tip their
we've had a
hand with
terrible
bringing in Antonio
offensive
Gibson.
line. We've had a terrible offensive line, Dave. It's a bad offense. He was running into the back of his guards because they were getting shoved back 2 yards after every play. And then you're going to
Didn't
say
stop Zeke
Antonio,
from being a top 10 running back.
because of a million touchdowns. We're going to sit on here all day, Jeff.
We can go on and on. There's just nothing in Rhamondre Stevenson's efficiency that excites me. He had one good season 2 years ago that was propped up by a bunch of volume that went his way because Damian Harris got injured. You look last year, out of 147 running backs, he was 141st in EPA. Doesn't break tackles, doesn't get breakaway runs. He drew a bunch of targets 2 years ago, but we didn't see that translate last year. I'm just really concerned about trying to say that he's a top 20 running back in Dynasty.
Before we move on, do you own any Rhamondre in any leagues that we're in?
I've traded away all of my Rhamondre Stevenson shares.
Dang, I thought I was going to get a discount just now.
All right, so we'll wrap it up. We got one more tier 6 here. We got Marshawn Lloyd, Najee Harris, Tony Pollard, Kendre Miller, Zach Charbonnet, Jaylen Wright. So this is really kind of maybe the young backup running back tier, or we still got Tony Pollard hanging out here, Najee Harris hanging out here. Dave, why do you still believe in Tony Pollard?
Because last year he was hurt and he had terrible touchdown luck. But if you look down the end of the season when his injury was behind him, we started seeing the things that we like about Tony Pollard. He was breaking tackles, breakaway runs. If there wasn't an electric fence at the goal line that kept him from scoring touches last year, I think the narrative around Tony Pollard would be very different. Two of my favorite buys in Dynasty right now are both Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday on the show with JJ Zachariason. I don't know how the touches are going to get split up. Their skill sets overlap so much that I think we could see what's just kind of a 50-50 split. But both Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears are a tweaked ankle away on their teammate from being a workhorse. They can catch passes, they can break away runs, they can score touchdowns, they can kind of do everything. So I think that Tony Pollard, especially right now, there's just a buy window open because of a series of really unfortunate events last year. But I'm still a believer in the talent.
Yeah, and you guys question why I still believe in Kendre Miller and Zach Charbonnet. And so I really look at it, it's tough for me to group them apart from Jaylen Wright and Marshawn Lloyd because they were drafted in similar range. I know they didn't take off as their rookie year, but we kind of saw them drafted into situations we didn't expect them to take off in. But we did see glimpses when they had opportunities. I know Kendre Miller, he was running back 12, week 17. Nobody played fantasy week 17, so we don't realize it. But he did have a good game that week. He had a running back 21 week 5. So flashes he was injured for a part of his rookie season. I think that
And training,
that's going to be. Yeah, and that's going to be an opportunity with Alvin Kamara peeling off. We did see trade rumors surrounding Alvin Kamara's name last year, so that's a situation I want to buy in on Kendre Miller if people are fading there. And then Charbonnet is another one that it seems to be a little bit of a hard fade, and it seems to be people believed Ken Walker is going to be that guy, but they've kind of been vocal about really an open competition for that running back room. And I think that there's a chance Charbonnet does grab a larger role. And so those are two players that we liked last year when we were all in rookie fever that I'm still buying in on. But
I was going to say, Kendre.
What do you got?
No, I was like, Kendre, I'm not with you on. I've never believed in Kendre, but Sharp, it's more about, like, for me, Sharp is, I don't know. I don't know what Sharp is. I have tons of shares because I believed in the player. Like, the amount of Charbonnet and Tank Bigsby that I'm holding is painful, arguably. So, like, I hope something happens, and he's not a person I want to sell because where I drafted him at and the state of those rosters, it's like, do I really want to move him right now when I could potentially get more at the beginning of the season or in season? And at worst, he's still going to be kind of ranked nothing, if that makes sense. Is like this is like the backup range or the I hate Najee Harris train range, So like for that, it's like if anything, I love the confirmation bias you're giving me about Charbonnet. I'm like, man, maybe I will hang on to him forever. Like so, it's like for me, Kendre Miller, I just never thought he was a great talent, and the Saints, with the exception of Olave, I don't. As long as they have Dennis Allen, it's hard for me to take them seriously because I don't like they think that they're ready to compete. They've believed that for 5 years. So just, I don't know, take that and consider that when you think about Saints players. So.
Yeah. I like the Kyren Williams lesson of just buy uncertainty with young running backs that you like at some point. And so that's kind of where I view it. But Dave, do you have any closing thoughts? And I would definitely want to give you a platform. Thank you so much for being here today. And obviously your running back article is fantastic. The work that you do with Alfredo on the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show is fantastic. What else do you have for us?
That's pretty much it. You can find all my stuff at Football Guys. I think the closing thing that I'd like to say on this show, and this is going to ruffle a lot of feathers here. If you're in your dynasty leagues right now, the guys you should be going out and buying are the guys that nobody else is buying. Everybody wants to get these young, sexy players that they're hoping can be running backs for years to come. The guys that I'm trying to buy right now, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, James Cook, Ezekiel Elliott, the guys that you can get for 3rd and 4th round picks right now that everybody is trying to offload, and we can project some volume on them this year. I think that's kind of the way I like to play Dynasty. Zig when everybody else is zagging. Don't go after these flashy young players that can plummet in value. Just draft the guys for cheap that you can get for close to nothing and get pretty replaceable value for on your roster.
Yeah, I think that's a great mindset, great outlook. Again, thank you for being here. Make sure to follow my co-host Jagger. Jagger does not have enough Twitter followers out there. Make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, this brand new Dynasty channel. But thank you so much out there for listening, for being with us with Football Guys. And that said, I'm Jeff Bell.
And I'm Jagger May. And like I said, guys, I am out there. People don't see me yet, but I will be shouting into the wind that you should be buying players. Like Dave's actually right. As much as I wanted to argue with them and give them crap, there's a lot of old players. And before we go, Jeff, there's a thought that that people need to hear. Right now, the rookie running backs like Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson are discounts. Go buy them. I think like with the exception, go buy Dave's players. But if you want premium players, right now, Jonathan Brooks arguably should be ahead of Ladd McConkey, and I'm getting him in like round 2. That's not saying I hate Ladd McConkey, but Jonathan Brooks is like a very good player. That's something that we didn't really hit on is the value of some of these rookies.
I was hoping we would have dug into him a little bit. There's still this misconception. Everyone says this running back class sucks.
It doesn't.
People just hold on to that. But Jonathan Brooks was drafted highly into a premium spot with an offensive coordinator who has shown that he likes to lean on a running back. We're talking about the best rushing and pass catching back in this class, landing into a spot where he could take off. And he'll play this year, and he's going to be healthy down the stretch. He's going to help a lot of people win fantasy championships this year. Now that we've just gone back like 4 tiers and started talking about Jonathan Brooks.
Thank you all. Have a great day.